I'd like to call to order the October meeting of the New Bern Board of Adjustments. Jeff, would you call the roll?
Sure. Richard Parsons.
Here.
Dorothea White.
Here.
Peter Dillon.
Here.
Jim Morrison.
Here.
John Riggs.
Here.
John Morrell. Kip Paraguay.
Here.
Barbara Sampson.
Here.
Ross Beebe.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. As we begin this evening, we're going to have a hearing on a request for a bed and breakfast. And I do know that all the board members have received their package and they have information regarding some recommendations from the HPC Commission. We will deal with that after our normal proceedings when we talk about if there's any conditions that we might apply to the permit if we so choose to issue the permit. But as for the audience, as we begin tonight's hearing, I'd like to take a minute to explain to everyone the process that we will be undertaking so that you'll feel comfortable with the process as it unfolds. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial board. Consequently, everyone who wishes to speak at tonight's hearing must be sworn in before speaking. The second important aspect of being a quasi-judicial board is that we may only consider substantial and material evidence, in other words, facts, in our decision-making process. We cannot accept hearsay, opinions, or emotions. The first step in the hearing process is for the application for the special use permit to be presented to the board by the city staff. Following staff presentation, the board will begin to solicit facts concerning 6 requirements specified by law. After each of the 6 requirements, there will be a public comment period where evidence will be presented to the board. After all 6 items have been presented, evidence heard, and closing comments made, the board will deliberate and vote on each of the requirements one at a time. Following the voting, the board will vote whether to approve or deny the application. Following that process, anyone who would like to speak during this evening's meeting must be sworn in. I invite you up to the podium to be sworn in.
You guys don't plan on speaking tonight? Okay. You guys got your hand raised? You swear the testimony that you give tonight is true to the best of your knowledge? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. The first order of business on tonight's agenda is consideration of a special use permit request for a bed and breakfast. The property is located at 501 Metcalf Street and is further identified as Craven County Parcel number 8-003-019. Jeff, would you like to introduce this request?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, tonight we are hearing a special use permit for 501 Metcalf Street. The request is for a 2-bedroom bed and breakfast. The applicant is Gregory Rush. He's also the owner. The existing zoning for the property is R8 residential. A request to allow a 2-room bed and breakfast. It's a 0.6 acre site and it's presently a single family residential use. Here's the imagery. It's the corner of Metcalf, sorry. As the proposed site plan, as it was submitted to us, as the chair stated earlier, there were some recommendations, changes to that site plan that before it went to the Historic Preservation Commission, which the Historic Preservation Commission is well within their right to recommend to you guys. We will be talking about that later on when we go through our 6 findings, and then we talk about the conditions. We'll get a little more specific into that request. That request was also in your packet. But generally speaking, just to probably prime you a little bit, the initial request had a 10-foot driveway in the front of the property. That has been removed, and the parking all moved to the rear of the property. As the existing zoning is R8 as a small dot on the site itself. Section 15146, the table of permissible uses, requires that all bed and breakfasts within the historic district in the R8 zoning request a special use in order to operate. The property was properly posted per our ordinance, and the city department reviewed this on 9/25. Staff finds that the proposed project is consistent with the plan, rules, and regulations of the City of New Bern with no further changes at this point in time. According to Section 15146, bed and breakfasts must obtain a special use permit to operate an R8 residential within the historic district overlays. Staff finds the applicant has met all land use ordinance requirements of Section 1554 for the special use permit and therefore recommends approval of the request. Here is the section of the ordinance that deals with the Historic Preservation Commission recommendations. We'll probably touch on, we'll come back to this at the end of our findings.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is the applicant present this evening? If you'd like to give a brief description of what your request entails to the board.
Sure. I'm requesting a special use permit.
Submit your...
I'm Gregory Rush.
There you
I live
go.
at 501 Metcalf Street. And I'm requesting a special use permit for the purpose of a bed and breakfast with 2 bedrooms only usable, to be used occasionally, probably 180 days a year, not heavy use. And there's no food involved. It's just rooms rented with private bathrooms.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. At this time, we'll actually begin, if you have nothing else to present. You can have a seat.
Well, let me just, I'm here to apply for the bed and breakfast special use permit in Zone 8 as permitted in the City of New Bern's Land Use Code, Section 15-146, Table of Permissible Uses.
Thank you. At this time, I will begin the 6-step process that we are going to undertake. And the first requirement that needs to be met for the issuance of a special use permit is that the requested permit is within its jurisdiction according to the table of permissible uses. I think Mr. Rouse has already answered that question on behalf of the applicant. Is there anyone who would like to speak in addition to question number 1, which is the requested permit is within its jurisdiction according to the table of permissible uses? Hearing none, I will move on to requirement number 2. That is that the application submitted is complete. The applicant has the opportunity to make any comments they'd like.
Yes, the application is complete with all the required paperwork and department heads.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to question number 2? The application is complete. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll move on to question number 3, requirement number 3. If completed as proposed in the application, the development will comply with all the requirements of the city ordinance.
The project was submitted for department site plan review and was approved by each department as it meets all the required City of New Bern's land use codes, including health and safety. The plan was also submitted to the Historical Preservation Committee and received a certificate of appropriateness.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to requirement number 3, that the development will comply with all the requirements of this ordinance?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
Nancy Hollow.
Please go to the podium.
You're going to bring up the condition, I presume, of the HPC?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Ruggieri said yes.
Yes,
So
we're
you'll be
going to do
bringing
that
that
later.
up. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And just for verification to the board, the application as required in the ordinance is for 2 parking places to be provided. That's what the ordinance requires. Okay. Requirement number 4, the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted.
There is no factual evidence that this use has had a negative financial impact. Data from the Neuse River Regional Association of Realtors indicates that the values of the residential detached in the historical downtown New Bern have increased in the last 2 years. The application for the special use permit was defined on a table of permissible uses and has been reviewed by the approved by all city departments. The permit is in compliance with the City of New Bern's land and use ordinance. A COA was received from HPA.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to comment or speak to about requirement number 4, that the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted? Okay. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll move on to requirement number 5. The use will not substantially reduce the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the use is a public necessity. Applicant? Yeah, applicant has the opportunity to speak. Yeah, the use will not substantially reduce the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the use is a public necessity. There's really 2 questions in there. I think probably at this time you just need to deal with the first part of that.
I think I might have answered that before, but...
You did speak to it, but...
Okay, I'll repeat it. There is no factual evidence that this use has had any negative financial impact. Data from the Neuse River Regional Association of Realtors indicates the values of residential detached in historical downtown New Bern have increased in the last 2 years.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment or speak to requirement number 5? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll move on to number 6. The location and character of the use, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development of the city. Mr. Rouse?
Excuse me. The proposed use in compliance with the City of New Bern's land and use ordinance, it has been reviewed by all the appropriate departments, has been approved to be in harmony and general conformity with the current plan and development in the city. This special use permit is in compliance with the City of New Bern's land use ordinance and has been reviewed by all the departments required to review this application and is in harmony and is with the intent of land use ordinance. The plan is also submitted to the Historical Preservation Committee and received a certificate of appropriateness.
Thanks, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to comment or speak to requirement number 6? Final call for comments, if anyone would like, on any of the 6 topics. And I would also invite the board, if you have any questions at this time for Mr. Rouse, to feel free to inquire.
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, you said it'll be 180 days that you'll be using it, or what months or the 100 days? You said you have 180, you're gonna do it for 180 days? And I'd like to know, what months?
Oh, I don't know the months, but it's 180 days. It's usually just weekends, so it's not during the week, so it's occasional weekends, so that's why I came up with about 180 days.
Oh, that's for through the year?
Through the year, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And can I ask a question too?
Sure.
Your comments reference what you submitted to the HPC,
Mhm.
but having watched that, because I could not gain from what we received, what actually happened. What's still on our drawing is 4 parking spaces, parking lot in the front and the back. Now, my understanding is you have agreed with them to remove the front parking lot.
A driveway, yes,
Well, but it's going to be parking for 2 cars.
correct.
And now there's 3 spaces in the back
I have to provide 3 parking spots, yes.
on the property.
Yes,
And just for the clarification of the members, that's not what the drawing that you see. The back, the front one is not there, and the back one is widened.
Jeff, you wanna
That's
pull- you wanna
what
pull
you
that
want.
up
That's what
again,
you
just for
want.
everybody's clarification?
Is the one that's not on our packet.
that's what they suggested.
Yeah.
And the HPC issued it with conditions, not just issued a COA, is that right?
I don't remember the,
So they, I guess, they probably issued it with 3 parking spaces.
correct, yeah, that,
So they
that
issued it,
was
excuse me.
nothing.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for the clarification, Jim. Any other questions for Mr. Rouse? If not, thank you, Mr. Rouse, for answering the questions.
Just
And
for
at this time-
clarification, Mr. Chairman, I knew Mr. Morrison, someone would pick up on where we're at right now. And again, we have made the statement that the site plan is in compliance with the ordinances, and as presented to you, it is. So that's the reason why we can move forward to this spot. We will get to the conditions and hear the HPC's recommendation specific to this project later on when we do the conditions vote, and at that point, then we'll be able to nail down what the final site plan actually is. I understand it's a confusing process. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to close public comment on the 6 requirements.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public comment process. Any further discussion, questions? If not, we can take a voice vote on closing public comment, I believe.
Do you want to do a roll, or you just want to?
I think we can do a voice vote on
Okay.
closing public comment. All in favor of closing public comment, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Public comment period is now closed. Okay, it's time for the board to consider all of the 6 requirements with the information that's been provided both in your packet and what we have heard from the public. And we will begin that process at this time, and we will do roll call vote on each of the 6 requirements to go down through them. Again, the first requirement, the requested permit is within its jurisdiction according to the table of permissible uses. Is there any discussion or questions within the board?
Mr. Chairman, I find with I move that we find the requested permit is within its jurisdiction according to the table of permissible uses.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any further questions? Roll call?
1 second, Mr. Chairman. Go outside my thing. Right. John Riggs,
Yes.
Dorothea White,
Yes.
Ross Beebe,
Yes.
Richard Parsons,
Yes.
Barbara Sampson,
Yes.
Peter Dillon,
Yes.
Jim Morrison,
Yes.
Kip Paraguay.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Requirement number 2 is that the application is complete. Questions from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, with the exception of the map being different than the map. Well, okay, the map we're considering is the map we received the special use permit. Okay. Excuse me. So, Mr. Chairman, I move we find the application is complete.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further questions from the board? discussion? Roll call, please.
Jim Morrison,
Yes.
Peter Dillon,
Yes.
Barbara Simpson,
Yes.
Richard Parsons.
Yes.
Ross Beebe,
Yes.
Dorothea White,
Yes.
John Riggs.
Yes.
Motion passes. Oh, Kip Paraguay.
Yeah, okay,
Sorry,
thank
I
you.
was the chair last.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, moving on to requirement number 3. If completed as proposed in the application, the development will comply with all the requirements of this ordinance. Any questions or discussion amongst the board?
Chairman Paraboy, if we are going to consider the HPC extra findings, do we need to say still that it is according to what we have before us or not?
Yes, because the application that is submitted to us meets the requirements of 2 parking places available on site for the 2-bedroom bed and breakfast as stated in the ordinance. So yes, it would comply with that.
And the 2 off-street parking spaces that are required for any single-family residential development. So you would see as the driveway for 2, in theory, for his private use, and then the parking spaces in the rear for the bed and breakfast use.
Thank you.
Any further questions, discussion? I'll entertain a motion on item number 3.
Mr. Chairman, if completed as proposed, I move we find the application, the development will comply with all of the requirements of this ordinance.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions, discussion amongst the board? If not, roll call.
John Riggs.
Yes.
Dorothea White.
Yes.
Ross Beebe.
Yes.
Richard Parsons.
Yes.
Barbara Simpson.
Yes.
Peter Dillon.
Yes.
Jim Morrison.
Yes.
Kip Paraguay.
Yes.
Passes.
Requirement number 4, the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted. Questions, discussion in the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the development, if approved as proposed, will not materially endanger the public health or safety.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Jim Morrison.
Yes.
Peter Dillon.
Yes.
Barbara Simpson.
Yes.
Richard Parsons.
Yes.
Ross Beebe.
Yes.
Dorothea White.
Yes.
John Riggs.
Yes.
Kip Paraguay.
Yes.
The pen's moving
I am
faster
not in
than
your
my
favor today, I can
I
tell. Okay, requirement number 5, and I remind the board that there are 2 parts to this question, and we'll deal with them separately at the request of the city attorney, so for the record only. The first part of the question is the use will not substantially reduce the value of adjoining or abutting property, and we'll cut it off right there. Any additional discussion, questions from the board?
There's been no evidence submitted that it would.
Well, entertain the motion then.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move we find the use will not substantially reduce the value of adjoining or abutting property.
Second.
Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call?
John Riggs.
Yes.
Dorothea White.
Yes.
Ross Beebe.
Yes.
Richard Parsons.
Yes.
Barbara Sampson.
Yes.
Peter Dillon.
Yes.
Jim Morrison.
Yes.
Kip Paraguay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. And the second part of that question is that the use is a public necessity. A negative vote here does not really matter, and so much all we're doing is clarifying for the record. Could I have a motion from someone?
I move that we find that this is not a public necessity.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any conversation, discussion, questions? Roll call?
John Riggs,
Yes.
Dorothy White,
Yes.
Ross Beebe,
Yes.
Richard Parsons,
Yes.
Barbara Sampson,
Yes.
Peter Dillon,
Yes.
Jim Morrison,
Yes.
Kip Paraguay.
Yes.
Tongue tied
And-
today.
Requirement number 6, the location and character of the use, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development of the city. Questions, discussion amongst the board? Entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we find the location and character of the use, if developed according to the plan as submitted and approved, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development of the city.
I second that.
Yeah. You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call?
Jim Morrison,
Yes.
Peter Dillon,
Yes.
Barbara Sampson,
Yes.
Richard Parsons,
Yes.
Ross Beebe,
Yes.
Dorothea White,
Yes.
John Riggs,
Yes.
Kip Paraguay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, we've been through the 6 requirements for the issuance of a special use permit, and now we need to decide whether or not we want to approve or deny the special use permit. Any questions or discussion amongst the board before a motion is accepted? I will entertain a motion to approve or deny the special use permit.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the special use permit.
Okay, you have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Roll call?
John Riggs,
Yes.
Dorothea White,
Yes.
Ross Beebe,
Yes.
Richard Parsons,
Yes.
Barbara Sampson,
Yes.
Peter Dillon,
Yes.
Jim Morrison,
Yes.
Kip Paraguay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, we have approved the issuance of a special use permit based upon the submitted application and site plan. Now is an opportunity for us to discuss any conditions that the board or the staff may wish to include and attach to the special use permit that we are going to issue. This is the time that we can discuss the actions of the HPC, requesting or recommending that the requirement for 2 parking spaces be reduced to 1. If you remember in your packet, that was their recommendation.
Sure. I can give a little more background to that, Mr. Chair. HPC's recommendation, final recommendation or final action, I guess, in their certificate of appropriateness was to remove the front driveway portion and to include 3 parking spaces in the rear of the property. In order to do that and still meet the rules of the city, the HPC has recommended to the Board of Adjustment that we reduce the requirement of off-street parking for single-family residential uses, which is essentially what a bed and breakfast is. Part of it is single-family residential, essentially, because the owner still lives there. From 2 spaces to 1 space, so that all the parking for the property will essentially be provided for in the rear, in 3 spaces on the left of the proposed site plan, where there are now 2. We would be essentially putting 3 spaces back there and reducing the requirement from 2 spaces to 1. If that clears anything up or makes it more confusing, I'm not sure.
If we did so, then if you had both rooms occupied, one of the occupants would have to park on the street.
Both only required 1 space per room. So
Right.
with 3 spaces, he would have 1 for the single-family residential use and 2 for people renting rooms. So it'd be fully parked off-street.
If we leave it at 3,
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
If we reduce it to 1,
Oh.
no, okay.
well, maybe we're saying the same thing a little differently.
Now, I think the single-family residence in and of itself requires
It's
2
two.
spaces.
Mhm.
And that's what they would like to reduce to 1.
Reduce that.
Yeah, so-
Therefore, then the two beds each get a space.
Okay.
So he would be required 4 spaces today without
Okay.
hearing the recommendation from HPC. The project would require 4 spaces. Essentially, what the HPC approved was 3 spaces. By getting from 4 to 3, they're asking you to reduce the requirement of off-street parking for single-family residential from 2 to 1.
Okay. Not the bed and breakfast.
Not the bed and breakfast, correct.
Okay.
Bed and breakfast
Gotcha.
remains at 2.
I move that we attach as a condition that the requirement for 2 parking spaces for the single-family residential unit be reduced to 1 parking space.
Okay, we have a motion.
I just want to ask a quick question.
Well, wait till we get a second.
Okay, all right.
I think we need a discussion.
Okay. Have some
And
discussion.
I'm a little concerned. I believe we answered to one person that would come up later. Do we get any public comment on parking? Because the way we approached this, we only approached the special use permit, but not the secondary request for parking. And I don't know if anybody had comments on parking or not. The way we've done
I
that,
think it would be appropriate to open public comment again.
if anyone chooses to. Is that fair or not?
If
It's up to the board.
would
Yeah.
like to reopen public comments for the parking issue, yes, I think
Right.
that.
Nancy Hollis, I believe, asked if we were going to bring that up later, so
Yes.
that's the only reason I'm
Okay.
asking that.
Is the board willing to hear public comment on the parking issue?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nancy Hollows. I live at 4438 River Shore Drive. And I just wanted to say that Mr. Rush has gone through a lot of hoops in this application. And this final decision by the HBC, I think, was a very good decision, mainly because it gets all the parking behind the building like most corner lots, homes have in downtown New Bern. And so that they'll come in to park behind his house on New Street. And their decision not to have parking in the front of the house on the lawn was an excellent decision too, but I know Mr. Rush is ready to move on. So I just want to say I support that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak about the parking issue? Please state your name and address.
Lorianne Prill, 212 New Street. There's currently no on-site parking, so all of the residential parking is done on-street. 3 spots is sufficient for the interim parking from a guest from time to time. Whether it's in the front or the back, it really should not matter. Many of us park on the side or in front of our home. Some of us park in the front and the back. Some park on the street. Some park around the corner. That's what we do in downtown New Bern.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
I'm Sherry Jones. My husband and I reside at 507 Metcalf Street. We've been there for a very long time and have known previous owners. And this is the first time anyone's ever attempted to park on their front lawn. Every other homeowner that's lived in that home, owned that home since we've been there in 34 years, has always utilized the backyard for parking. And this was just something very strange. And since August of 2018, when the first application for the 10-foot driveway was made to HPC, there have been up to 4 or 5 cars on the front lawn at different times. That application expired in August of this year, and parking continued on the front lawn. That issue now has been resolved, and we're very happy about that. I congratulate Mr. Rush on his special use permit for his 2-bedroom B&B, but we were just, the character of the neighborhood, and we just dubbed it a parking lot because that's what it looked like, a used parking lot with 3 to 4 cars parked on the front lawn. Thank you.
Gregory Rush, 501 Metcalf. Initially, I did have HPC approve a 10-foot driveway. I had it did expire just recently in August. I went ahead and got all these permits ahead of time when I started my renovation. On that same permit, I had 8 tree removals. I had a front porch, a back porch. I had a bay window removed, new doors put in, and back doors put in and removed. So I've done a lot of those things. But we also had Florence and 2 other hurricanes. And my work was put off about 6 months due to contractors not being available. And also, they weren't available, and the prices increased tremendously during this lackage of workers. And I've worked diligently for a year on the property. And when she's talking about with 4 cars, those are mostly contractors working. And occasionally, someone would park there side by side by mistake. But trucks were there working. That if you look on that, and I also want to clarify that front yard is really a front side yard. That addition there is a kitchen, and that's where I would have liked to have parked, so I can pull in and go straight into my house with groceries. But now I'm parking in the rear and walking all the way around the corner and up and carrying groceries. I could pull up to the front of the house, drop off groceries, and pull in the back. And if you look at the parking in the back, that's 2 spots right there. There's really no room for the 3rd spot, but I would comply with whatever you just tell me to do. But it makes a lot of sense. Every other house on Metcalf has driveways or parking pads if they have parking on the side of the house or in the front area. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Lorelei Schaffhausen. I live at 511 Metcalf Street. And we settled the parking issue at HPC, so I don't think we need to say anything more about that. But what I really don't understand is why 2 spaces are required for residents in single-family homes in a section of town where many people don't have off-street parking, including Metcalf Street. We have several homes where the only parking they have is on the street. So I certainly think 1 off-street parking space is sufficient for this project.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak about the issue at hand, parking and the reduction of the requirement for 2 down to 1? Okay.
May I just ask one clarification?
Sure. State your name and address.
Sure. My name is Leslie Fritchie. My mom's house is at 620 New Street, but I'm just trying to understand what is here on the proposed site plan. So on the proposed site plan, are there 3 parking spots along in the front of the house and then 2 in the rear? Is that what is being proposed?
No. From what I understand, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, that the driveway, which is in the top right of the site plan, has been eliminated.
Okay.
And that all of the parking will be in the bottom left corner where you see that big area behind the house.
Okay.
And that will be expanded from 2 to 3.
Okay, with no parking then in the front of the house.
That's
as
correct.
Envisioned. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, the conversation wasn't relating to the map as I saw it, so thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? If not, board?
Well, I feel better now, having heard no complaints, and I'll second Mr. Parsons' motion.
Okay. We have a motion and second. Would you restate your...
Well, in the meantime, I move that we close the public comment.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Second.
We'll do voice vote. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Did you second it, Jim? Okay. All in favor of closing the public comment, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
I second Mr. Parsons' motion.
Okay. Can you read that motion for us so we have clarity?
Mr. Parsons' motion?
Yes.
To approve the reduction from 2 to 1, but we need to make 2 findings in that motion.
Yes.
Yeah, when we make that motion. So I will read off, and you all can accept this into the motion if you so choose. In order to reduce the off-street parking requirement, the board must find that the lesser number of off-street parking spaces will not create problems due to increased on-street parking, and that no threat to public safety is thereby created. So part of your motion needs to.
As part of my motion, I would like for both of these to be incorporated into the motion.
Okay, does everybody understand that?
Except,
Okay, second has been accepted with the amendments.
and I think what I'm encouraged by is we have one more parking space for single-family residents than we used to. So,
Okay, is the board ready to vote? Any more discussion or questions? We will have a roll call on the final condition to be applied to the special use permit.
John Riggs.
Yes.
Dorothea White.
Yes.
Ross Beebe.
Yes.
Richard Parsons.
Yes.
Barbara Sampson.
Yes.
Peter Dillon.
I have just one question. We're
What-
voting also on the acceptance of the Historic Preservation Commission condition, right?
Correct.
That is the basic essence of Mr. Parsons.
All right, that's incorporated. In that case, yes.
Jim Morrison.
yes.
Kip Paragoy.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay. Mr. Rouse, you have a special use permit with conditions attached, and the staff will be getting that pulled together sometime this week.
Oh, you can sign it right now.
All right, I can sign it right now, but I got a red pen, so that wouldn't be very pretty. Okay. That is the only agenda on our meeting tonight. That being resolved, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm making a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you all.